In the United States, 29.1 million people are living with diabetes. 90% of the U.S. population that has diabetes has type 2 diabetes. The other 10% has type 1 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is often called juvenile diabetes or insulin-dependent diabetes. But just because it may be called juvenile diabetes does not mean only children have it. 1 in every 400 to 600 children have type 1 diabetes, and 5% of adults diagnosed with diabetes are diagnosed with type 1. 50% of patients that are newly diagnosed with type 1 diabetes are age 20 and above. Type 1 diabetes occurs when the body's immune system attacks and destroys certain cells in the pancreas. These cells are called beta cells and are contained along with other types of cells within small islands of endocrine cells called the pancreatic islets. Beta cells typically produce insulin, a hormone that helps the body move the glucose contained in foods into cells throughout the body, which use it for energy. But when the beta cells are destroyed, no insulin can be produced and the glucose stays in the blood, instead where it can cause serious damage to all the organ systems of the body. It is important to remember that diabetes is not caused by obesity or eating too many sugary foods. Also, if you have diabetes, it doesn't mean that you can't eat any sugary foods. People with diabetes can participate in sports. Kids can get type 2 diabetes. And currently, there may be no cure for diabetes, but taking insulin can often help those that have type 1 diabetes.
An insulin pump is a computerized device that is programmed to deliver insulin into the fatty tissue under the skin. The parts of the pump include the insulin reservoir, the infusion set, the tube, and the cannula. The insulin reservoir holds the insulin in the pump and is delivered into the body by a tube which ends in a small needle called a cannula, which is located on the underside of the infusion set. The infusion set is the connector that allows insulin to flow from the pump into the skin. It is attached to the skin with a strong adhesive. The insulin pump lasts for years, but the insulin supply and certain pump components, such as the reservoir, tubing, and infusion set, are changed every few days. Most pumps are worn on a belt or carried in a pocket.
Well, I had a lot of signs and symptoms. I was really moody and irritable, and my parents thought it was just because I was hormonal and going through puberty, but it was really because of my sugar levels going up and down. And I was really thirsty all the time, and I had to use the bathroom a lot. And then I was especially tired. I didn't have any energy to like hang out with my friends or go to the mall or do sports like I used to. I do have an insulin pump just because it automatically administers the insulin so that I don't have to worry about it. It was kind of hard to adjust to just because I have to change where it goes every 2 to 3 days, and that can be a little bit painful having to like prick myself again. And then you also have to be really careful with the cord and like making sure it doesn't come unplugged or anything. And I think the hardest thing to adjust to was like checking my glucose levels so many times a day, because you have to prick your finger like 10 times a day to make sure your blood sugar levels are in the right range.
So coming into college as a type 1 diabetic, obviously my parents were really worried about me being on my own and taking care of myself independently because I hadn't before. And obviously, their main concern was about my roommate situation and whether I would find someone who would know how to take care of me like they did and know me like my parents do, whether I was high or low, or say, at worst I have a seizure or go into a coma, would they be able to actually get me the help that I need? And then the other part that's really impacted my life is playing sports. It's a lot more difficult for me to expend a lot of energy all at once because I'm diabetic. And I was a big soccer player in high school and I really wanted to continue through college. But as many people might not know, exercise and a lot of activity for diabetics can actually influence your blood sugar levels. And so it just makes it a little more difficult. There's a lot of planning that goes into it. It takes a little bit more time, but I really wanted to play in college and I still want to pursue what I want, and so I'm not going to let it hold me back. So you just kind of got to overcome the bad moments and go with the good. Okay, so as a type 1 diabetic, diet is probably the largest lifestyle change that I had to make after I was diagnosed. It's a lot of information to take in because a lot of the foods that you were used to eating, you can't really enjoy as much anymore without having to plan out everything. So carbs are the most likely to affect blood sugar levels throughout the day, and so in order to counteract for the carbs that I eat throughout the day, I actually have to follow an insulin regimen that's controlled by the pump that I use, and I have to check every time before I eat. I have to check my blood sugar level and counteract for what I'm eating. So it's a lot to take in. It's a lot of hard work to count everything that's in your meals and figure out what's good or bad for you. But ultimately, it's my life kind of depends on it now. So it just kind of becomes part of your daily routine.
So people often ask me this question a lot, and to be honest, my life really hasn't changed that dramatically. The only thing that probably really affected my life was the cost of diabetes. I spend a lot of money every month, on average about $100, buying insulin for my pump. And something a lot of people don't know is the pump costs around $5,000. So it's a lot of money, but luckily my pump hasn't really failed me yet, so just a little bit of maintenance, I've been able to maintain it. Another issue was finding insurance for a long time because diabetes is considered a pre-existing condition, so I would get denied often, but thanks to the new Health Care Act, I've been able to not only find a carrier who will insure me, but I also don't have higher premiums anymore, which has really helped somebody who is close to retiring. So I had 3 pregnancies that gave me 3 beautiful children, and all 3 times diabetes really didn't interfere too much with the pregnancies. The only thing that really changed was I had to increase my insulin intake because hormones produced by the placenta that help the baby grow healthy, unfortunately also will halt the action of insulin. So I just had to talk to my doctor and increase that intake, and we sort of had to figure it out along the way. But really that was because I maintained an active lifestyle while I was pregnant and always watched my diet and my caloric intake. So the only health problems I'm really facing right now is diabetic neuropathy, which is pretty common for type 1 diabetics. And it really just started with tingling in my fingers and sort of numbness that started in my 20s from having to prick my fingers so many times. And now it's to my toes, but it's not anything, it's just uncomfortable, but it's not really hurting anything. I just have to be careful and check my legs and my feet for sores because sometimes I can't feel when I scratch myself. And the only other thing is diabetic dermopathy, which it's not anything that's crazy. It's just, they look like age spots that are on the bottom of my legs, and it's just purely cosmetic. So I often wear pants now because I don't really like how they look. Other than that, I don't have glaucoma and I don't really face too many health problems, but I've kept up with my health and I exercise regularly, so that's kind of helped a lot.